So today we're going to go over the viewer's choice, and we were sent a handful of games, but there could be more. And if you do want to send in your games, feel free to send it to this link right here, or this link. One of the links. Not that one? Yeah, okay. Send it to this one. And if you email it to us, we'll be really excited, and then we might go over it during lecture, if it's a decent enough game. So today we're going to start with some games sent in from Toxic Hunter. And I believe these were all chess.com games. And I actually have 7 games in the database, all of which white won. So I don't know what it is with sending in games that white won, but hopefully they'll be entertaining. OK, and the thing about Toxic Hunter is he plays b3 on move 1 in all of these games, and he wins without too much effort. So out of the people here who play chess, have you guys seen this move b3 on move 1? Sometimes. What about you? Ben Simon?
Not much.
It's kind of a more modern move. This is called the Larsen opening, where white is trying to play bishop b2 and then attack the center, basically just with the bishop, with the fianchetto. Now it's known to be a little bit passive. And I'm not entirely impressed with at least the opening in most of these games, but we'll take a look. This game, knight c6, bishop b2, e5, e3, knight f6, and bishop to b5. And this is actually a very common position for the Larsen opening. And white's main idea is to essentially pressure the e5 pawn, where right now white's threatening to take on c6 and then just take on e5. And the question is what to do for black. How does black defend the e5 pawn? And it's actually a little bit awkward for black. And here black played a move which is reasonable, d6, but it's not the best move. So I'll leave it up to you guys. Can you find a different move for black which defends the e5 pawn?
Bishop in c6.
I think you mean bishop d6. Yeah, and bishop d6 is actually a better move, even though it looks awkward because you're blocking your d pawn, which in turn blocks the bishop. A lot of times what happens is later on, if bishop take knight, pawn take knight, and then this bishop is actually really well placed on d6. Now, one of the main lines here is that if white just kind of continues normal development, let's say knight e2, then black can provoke the bishop to take the knight. And in this case, white will usually take, black takes back, and black should be relatively happy here. Another move that I like to play, and I actually went over this in a previous YouTube video. Maybe Ben Simon can do some research and link it somewhere. But the move I like here for black is e4. Because what this does is it removes the target on e5 completely. And now this bishop is just kind of staring at the knight, which is well defended. And I've actually had a few games with e4. And I might as well just show it again in case people haven't seen the previous video, where black gets a very early initiative. And just a reminder for everyone, make sure your phones are on silent. OK. So after e4, white will normally play a move like knight e2. Black plays a6. The bishop, in this case, has to take the knight. If the bishop doesn't take the knight, say bishop c4, then black can play d5. And tactics are very important here, because the bishop is now trapped. And bishop is lost. Black will be up a piece. So after bishop takes c6.
One question.
Yep.
Why don't we take bishop into e4?
Yeah, bishop a4, that's a good point. Normally, this is the type of move you want to play, but not with your pawn on b3. And b5 will happen, your bishop gets trapped. So it's really important to kind of be aware of the tactics in the opening. So bishop takes c6, pawn take. And now the games I've had in this position have gone where my opponent castles. I play bishop d6. They play d3. And now from here, black is winning with the next move. And now the next move isn't obvious to a lot of players. So I think I'll just walk through it. It's kind of a classic what's called the Greek gift sacrifice, where black can take on h2. And the idea is black is giving up a bishop, but then getting a checkmating attack with the knight and queen. So after king take, knight g4, king goes back, queen h4, white's in really big trouble. And there's actually, I don't think, any way for white to survive here, if I'm not mistaken. If rook e1, then, I mean, white's whole king side falls apart. Queen take f2, king h1, and then probably a nice little fork like knight e3, with the idea we're threatening the queen and threatening mate in 1. And if you're ever going to fork something, it's usually best to fork the queen and checkmate. Those are like the two best things. So if we move back, white had to be very careful. And the mistake for white was probably castling too early. But actually, the decisive mistake is d3 here. What white should do is kind of be aware that bishop take h2 is a threat, and then play something like h3 or knight g3. But then black still has fun. For example, knight g3, perhaps a move, maybe h5. Actually, don't know if this works tactically, but probably h5, because if bishop take f6, take, white would like to take the e4 pawn, but the rook is hanging. And this is one of the issues for white in this opening, is when white plays kind of passively and restricted, and if black plays actively and precisely, then it's usually white who's under fire first. So let's go back to what happened in the game. But let's look at this move d6, because from this game, white got like a really nice position and then eventually won. Now, I do have one story behind d6. When I was a much kind of lesser experienced player, I was still decent. I had no idea what to play against this opening as black, and I used to play this move d6. And there was a game I played online, I think it was like back in high school, so like 5-6 years ago, and I played against Nakamura. And now I've played Nakamura like maybe 50 to 100 times over the course of my life. And the only game I ever beat him was with black in this opening after d6. And if we know Nakamura, he's like top Blitz player in the world. And I managed to beat him because he like over pushed, and then I got lucky. So, okay, let's look at this game. d4, yeah, and white had a nice position because this bishop had the nice kind of long open diagonal, and this is kind of a dream of the fianchettoed bishop. So take, knight f3, bishop e7, knight c3. So both sides doing fine with development. And then what eventually happened, it became pretty sharp, because black wants to attack on the queen side, white wants to attack on the king side. And this is very common, especially for these opposite side castling positions. You want to go for a quicker attack than your opponent. Now here, white played a pretty good move. White played a4, which essentially slows down black's attack, because black would like to play a4 himself and then open up the file. But when white plays a4, kind of the black pawn storm is slowed down. So black played queen d7, perhaps threatening b5. This move b5 never happened. Queen d3, h6. And now the next several moves I really liked from white, because white understood that material wasn't so important, and that initiative and attack was a lot more important. So what white did was just kind of sacrifice, and black took everything that was free and then got mated. So the first sacrifice we see is knight d4. Now, can anyone spot what the free pawn is that black can capture? a4 is a pawn that black can capture, but it's not free, because it's defended twice, right? Well, there's another pawn that can be captured by the bishop.
G2?
Yeah, g2. And it looks completely free, like not defended. Might as well take it. You attack the rook. And that's what black did. But this was a huge mistake, because it opens up the g-file. And in this position for white, the g-file is more important than just a pawn. So g-file will lead to a very strong attack. And that's very common, especially when you're attacking. Usually your main goal is to open up your files, or the files on the area of the board where your rooks can come into play. So here, white takes advantage of that very quickly. Rook hg1, bishop h3, and now a very nice sacrifice, knight to d5. And this move looks strange at first because the knight's not defended. And the knight can just take. And of course, that's what black did. Knight take d5. And now a pretty incredible sequence of moves from white. And this was actually pretty impressive because I don't know if I would have found like this whole sequence myself. So any ideas here what to do for white? Maybe I should put it on training mode so you guys can't cheat. Knight f5. Yeah, so the main point here is you want to target g7 because your rook and your bishop are already kind of aimed at g7. And knight f5 does put another attacker, and then there would be 3 attackers. And I think knight f5 is a really good move. But white probably just played a stronger move and used a similar idea, but a bit more forcing. So instead of playing knight f5 first, white takes on g7 first. And this is more forcing because the king has to take. And then you play knight f5, or maybe something else. And the king will be a lot more exposed. And black really has no choice, had to take. So if we see so far, white sacrificed the pawn, the knight, and the rook. But now it's going to be completely winning for white because the attack is too strong. And yeah, not knight f5, but knight e6, very strong. Double check, knight and bishop attacking the king. Whenever it's double check, the king has to move. You can never like deal with the 2 pieces checking the king any other way. King g8. And now we see the open g file is very nice for white. And yeah, it's rook g1 check. Black is kind of running out of options. Black played bishop to g5. And now it's simply knight take g5. And even though this move maybe isn't a check, doesn't seem entirely forcing, it's still really putting the pressure on black because any knight move will be a check. Like white's threatening a bunch of discovered checks. And basically every single white piece that's still on the board is directed at the black king. And this is really important when you're attacking, that you use like all the pieces you can. So here white was really resourceful with every single piece. Knight f6 was played, and now knight h7 check. Kind of nice sneaky move. The knight can't be taken. The rook delivers a check. Queen g4 was played, which is a pretty sad move. But like, what else to do? If this move bishop to g4, then knight take f6 check. And it's a triple fork. We don't really care about the bishop, but we're winning the queen at least, and we're probably mating very soon. Actually, we are mating very soon, because if the king moves here to g7 or h8, there's queen h7 mates. And something similar happened in the game. After knight h7, queen g4, white didn't take the queen. White just takes the knight first, king g7, still doesn't take the queen, queen h7 mates. So this was a really nice kind of example of attacking play and kind of using all your pieces to their maximum potential. The mistake of a lot of chess players is they'll try and attack with one piece, and usually those attacks are not as effective. Maybe we can take a look at one more Toxic Hunter game, because he played another nice game with b3. And all his games, it looks like he played 3 games with b3 as white and won all of them in under 30 moves. So let's look at this one. Here, his opponent played slightly differently. And actually, several kind of early mistakes were made in the opening. And I do want to make a point here that when you're playing in the opening, you kind of want to look for the best squares for your pieces in relation to your opponent's setup. And what I mean by that is you don't want to put your square or your pieces on squares which could be taken advantage of. And black did something kind of went against that rule in this position by playing bishop to c5. And normally this is like a decent developing move, just put your bishop in the center. But in this position, the bishop doesn't stand well on c5 because it's just staring at this pawn chain. And one of white's main plans is to play d4. And later on, okay, if white played correctly and white gets in d4, then the bishop will likely have to move again. And you never want to be moving the same piece twice too early on. Now, white didn't play entirely correctly here. What white should have done was play knight to f3, just developing the knight, attacking the pawn, and then preparing d4. And this would have given white some some nice early initiative. Instead, what white did was very strange. And white played kind of a fancy move. It looks like kind of a cool tactic. But it turns out to just be positionally bad. Played bishop take e5. At first, this looks like a blunder, because knight take e5, white just lost a bishop for a pawn. White's point was he now plays d4. And he's winning back either the bishop or the knight. The problem with this kind of sequence of moves for white is he's giving away, or he just gave away his best piece. The bishop was only developed piece. His pawn structure is kind of set up so the bishop is a good bishop. And bishop take e5 essentially trades off his good bishop. So after take and d4, now it's black to move. And I actually want at least the chess players here to think and decide whether you would rather keep the knight or keep the bishop. You can only keep one piece. So which piece would you rather save for the rest of the game?
I'll go with the knight.
OK, so both of you would rather keep the knight?
Yeah.
It's unfortunately the wrong answer. You'd much rather keep your bishop. And the reason why is because white already gave away his dark squared bishop, which means that white will be less able to kind of control the dark squares on the board. So it's very important. If your opponent ever gives away a bishop of a certain color, you want to keep that same bishop of the same color. And in this case, you would much rather keep the bishop for black. So the best move here is actually just move the bishop back to support the knight. And after white takes, then this bishop is incredibly powerful, actually targeting some weak points in white's position. It's interesting here. White only has one good move to save the rook. C3. C3, yeah, good. And knight defends c3, but if we notice, white's pieces are just completely undeveloped, and black can further development, maybe knight f6, d5, and black already has a really comfortable position. But I see this mistake so often, and this is one of the, I guess, separating factors between kind of beginner level players and more advanced players, is they pay very close attention to which pieces they're keeping on the board and which pieces they're trading off. And we're actually going to see, yeah, we see black check the king, plays c3. And now black is in a situation to still preserve the bishop. Black can still play bishop d6, but of course black gave away the bishop, which is not the right thing to do. White took back, and now white's doing really well, because white has the two center pawns, has initiative because this knight is still attacked. And it's funny because both sides kind of made the same mistake very early on. Both sides gave away their dark square bishop when it was completely not necessary. So this was more of a kind of positional mistake rather than tactical mistake. But OK, later on in the game, we'll definitely see some tactics. So knight c6, let's continue. Knight f3, b6. And yeah, I really liked white's position. Bishop d3 was played. I think bishop b5 is just a bit more aggressive. Like, this is a move you kind of dream of. Like pinning the knight. Knight's not defended. You're threatening to take the knight and fork the king and rook. So black's a little bit iffy here. Black would have to play bishop to d7. And then we could continue adding pressure with a move like knight e5. Probably a better option for whites. But if we go back, bishop d3 was played. Let's go forward a bit quicker. a6 was kind of weird. Rook c1, knight b4. The right move would be to preserve this bishop. Right now it's attacked by the knight. And again, you don't want to trade off like the good bishop for an opponent's knight. So where can the bishop go in this position where it can't be taken? And bishop b1, I know it looks like weird because you're moving all the way backwards, but the bishop maintains its nice long diagonal. And if black ever castles kingside, then the bishop is already placed pretty well to attack. And maybe white could organize some more attack, maybe with a3, eventually queen d3, create some mating ideas on h7. So this is pretty common where you want to preserve your bishop, especially if it's on a good diagonal. OK, let's go forward. Rook e1 was played. White gave away the bishop eventually. Black took. And we're going to zoom forward because things got traded off. The position transformed a little bit. Now it's kind of a classic knight versus bishop scenario And more of the time, especially when it's an open position, the bishop is normally slightly better than the knight. But in this position, I would probably prefer the knight a bit more, just because it's so nicely centralized. And black's pieces aren't really working together in any way. Like the queen and the two rooks are still like completely undeveloped. And white's queen and rooks are nicely placed on the open e file and the half-open c file. So bishop d5 was played, queen c2 attacking the c7 pawn. Now queen g5 counterattacking the g2 pawn. So white has to be very careful not to just get mated. So white played g3, queen h5. And black's idea is to somehow try and maneuver the queen to g2 or h1, because either of these squares would be mating squares. So black's plan, it looks like in this position, is to play queen to h3 and then queen to g2. And this is kind of an important concept when you're trying to plan in chess. Sometimes what you end up doing is identify the best place for a piece and then figure out how to get there. So if you identify the queen wants to go to g2, then you figure out how does the queen actually get there, and we can see very easily queen h3, queen g2 is the idea. So white played rook e3, and I don't know why black didn't play queen h3 here. Would have been a nice threat. Let me ask you guys, can you find a way for white to defend against queen g2?
Pawn to be the f3.
Yeah, moving the f pawn. You can either play f3 or f4. Because when you move the f pawn, your queen on c2 defends g2. I like f3. And OK, in this game, black didn't even threaten checkmate. Black went for f5, and white played f4. So white has a really nice position. Like everything kind of defends everything. The only undefended piece is a rook on e3, but that can't really be attacked. And meanwhile, this knight is really, really good on e5 because it's an outpost, and it can't be attacked by a black pawn. So if we go forward, bishop to e4 was played, attacking the queen, queen e2. And eventually we're going to see black's demise. First of all, losing the pawn. And then secondly, in this position, white played a really good move, which is probably the most forcing move. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this move leads to force mate. So black to move, look for all the possible checks. Or sorry, white to move, look for all the possible checks.
c4.
Very good. Queen c4, yeah. And the problem for black was because the f-pawn moved forward, there is an open line to attack the king. And after king h8, it's actually a really kind of famous mating idea which occurs in the game, where the queen and the knight work together. I should mention, like, white has a few different ways to win here. Like, white could easily just take the rook and be winning. But white played most precisely knight f7 check, forcing king g8. Now white takes the queen, king h8. And kind of the famous idea, which if you ask anyone who's rated like above 1500, they'll know this idea very, very well, is queen g8. And it's kind of the classic smothered mate. White is giving away the queen to smother the king that's surrounded by its own pieces, and knight f7 is mate. So pretty nice ending. Now, not the most like perfect game, but another nice example of some attacking ideas. And I think maybe the biggest thing to take away from this game was earlier kind of the concept of figuring out which pieces to trade and then which pieces to keep on the board. OK, how about we move on? And I think we're going to move to the game that everyone has been waiting for, and probably the people on YouTube have already seen. It's the game from the video which was released like 1 or 2 weeks ago between Mike Kummer and I don't even know the other guy's name. I guess his last name is Banks, Junior Banks. OK. And if you haven't seen the video, you can link it somewhere, maybe up here or down here. And it's a very kind of cringeworthy game, especially if you watch the video, because there's a lot of trash talking. Ton of blunders. Probably within the first 5 moves of the game, there were enough blunders to last like this whole session. But we'll try and not be too mean to the players. We'll just try and critique the moves and try and learn something, a thing or two. So Mike Kummer playing white against Junior Banks, E4. I'm sure Mike Kummer was hoping for some fried liver with an eventual like knight g5 and knight take f7. That didn't happen because black played the French defense. Only after d4, it wasn't the French defense. It was whatever this is called. It's like the French and Caro-Kann, which like, someone is already like shaking their head. If you want to like leave now, you're welcome to, and then you don't have to like suffer through this. But okay, so c6, really no purpose behind this move, because usually in the French, you want to play d5, and then you want to follow up with c5. And when you play c6, it's really just losing time. Now, Mike Kummer plays kind of an equally as bad move here. He tries to kind of capitalize too quickly when he should just like kind of play a more normal move. He played e5. It's completely overextending, giving black the opportunity to play d6, which black does well, plays d6. White should have not overextended, just leave the pawns in the center and play bishop d3. And the first like 6 moves were so difficult for me to look at because like neither side developed any pieces. Like they just kept pushing pawns. So e5 was played, d6 was played, and then another bad move from white, f4. Again, just kind of overextending. And if you watch in the video, like Mike Kummer was playing with his, I guess, like he was trying to make it physical and like really intimidate his opponent by playing this move like f4. But chess is not really a physical game where you're supposed to like scare your opponent. And you like, okay, just play knight f3 and develop. So
Eric, you mentioned this was a blitz game.
this was a blitz game. Okay, maybe I didn't mention that?
Yeah, it was 5
Yeah.
sudden death. It was for
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, usually in blitz, I guess the play is lower quality,
they're in the opening.
but still, yeah. Okay, f4. Now there is a really interesting opportunity for black to take advantage of f4. I guess in blitz, maybe this is harder to spot, but you see it? Queen h4, yeah. And this is like so common. Whenever a player moves their f-pawn, you got to look for queen h4. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it's just winning. In this case, maybe it's not winning, but it's good for black. Because what's going to happen, the king's in check. If the pawn blocks and queen e4 wins the rook, so white is pretty much obliged to play king d2 or king e2. Maybe king e2 is best. Actually, now that I look at this position, like both sides are kind of not doing that great. Like the king's on e2, but black has like no pieces ready to come into the game other than the queen. So I don't know what's going on here, actually. I don't know what side I would prefer. But this was definitely the best option for black. Instead, what happened, black just kept pushing pawns, played c5. And as I kind of said earlier, it's usually better for black to play c5 in one move rather than play c6 and then c5. And you kind of learn this type of thing through making mistakes and then learning from the experience. Now we're on move 5. No pieces have been developed. Now Mike Kummer finally develops his bishop with check. I'm sure he said check in the video. Had to. Knight c6. And now he played a very questionable move. And maybe he played this move because it's check and he could say something. But he kind of made the same mistake that we saw in the previous game, where he trades off his bishop when it's really not necessary. He played bishop takes c6. And especially when you're pinning a piece, it's usually not good to take that piece. What you want to do is apply more pressure and maintain the pin. So instead of bishop takes c6, okay, white could play maybe some move like knight f3, defend against queen h4, maintain the pin. This would offer him some more chances. But okay, he gave away the bishop. Yeah.
Question.
Yep. Sure.
So what is the best time to trade off a bishop with knight? What is, opportunities?
I would almost recommend never trading off the bishop for the knight unless you're sure that you're winning something. That's the general rule. Now, there's always exceptions, and in different positions, sometimes it will make sense positionally if you're fighting for a square that the knight's guarding, and sometimes you want to trade it off. But most of the time, especially in situations like this when you're pinning, you don't want to take a pinned piece. You want to apply pressure to the pinned piece. So one example, actually kind of a cool example, might as well show it. Let's say knight f3 is played. Then let's say black takes. White could take back. And in doing so, applies more pressure to the knight. Now we should note that the queen can't take the knight because that's a free queen, right? We should also note that like queen h4 is possible, but then maybe just a move like king f1. And again, the queen can't take the knight because it's still the pin on knight on c6. So probably would have been the better option for whites. Now in the game, yeah, take. Now you did mention double pawns. In this case, the double pawns aren't really that unfortunate for black for a few reasons. First of all, the pawns are probably going to be undoubled after these pawns get traded. Secondly, the thing about double pawns is they can open up more lines for the player who has the double pawns. So in this position, the lines that opened up, first of all, is a b file, which could be useful. Also, now the bishop has opportunity to come to a really nice diagonal from a6. So I think I would be relatively pleased as black in this position. Game continues, knight f3. Finally, we see some development. C take d4, queen take d4, queen take d4, knight take d4. So after 10 moves, there's only one developed piece on the board. Black develops. And now this is a really interesting moment because, OK, of course, it was a blitz game. And if you look in the video, Mike Kummer is about to automatically play knight takes c6. Like without even thinking, like free pawn, why not just take it? And then he stops himself because he realizes that sometimes pawns aren't always free. And in this position, if knight takes c6, he would have been severely punished. What can black do to basically win back more than a pawn?
Bishop b7.
Bishop b7. Hopefully everyone agrees. Bishop b7 is very good. Skewering the knight and the rook. But there's more tactics that exist here because when the knight moves, not too many squares the knight can move to. Let's say knight a5. Then black can take on g2, winning the pawn back and trapping the rook. So yeah, the c6 pawn is known as a poison pawn. You take the poison, you basically die. So if we go forward, bishop c5, knight f3. OK, now the game kind of starts to go in more normal territory. Sides develop, knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2. Now, OK, interestingly enough, black made the same like bishop take knight move. Probably not necessary, especially when no one's attacking you. I could understand like if white's about to play a3, then you could take. But if white's not even provoking you, for black, it's probably better just to continue development. Maybe play a move like bishop a6 and just get your pieces into the game. But OK, bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, knight d5. But OK, this is actually looking fairly balanced after kind of a rocky start for both sides. King d2, castle. Now bishop a5. And this was actually a really surprisingly good idea for Mike Kummer, because what Mike Kummer did was he just left his bishop on a5. And for a very long time, there was never a point where the black rook could access d8. So it was very difficult for black to fight for one of the only open file. And this is a surprisingly good positional move. So I don't usually say this, but I was impressed by Mike Kummer's move. So bishop a6. Now another impressive move by Mike Kummer. This is maybe slightly suspicious, but b3. And this is actually simply preparing to play c4, shutting out the bishop on a6, kicking away the knight from its nice post on d5. And yeah, we see Mike Kummer like understands some positional chess. Rook A B8, C4, knight F4, king E3, chasing the knight back. And then if we look at this position and we look at black's pieces compared to white's pieces, I mean, white just has the pieces on much better squares. And the white pieces do a very good job at restricting the black pieces. And just to kind of give an example, like all the black pieces are restricted in some way. Like the king and knight help restrict this knight, because these squares are off limits. This pawn on b3 restricts the black rook from ever infiltrating. The pawn on c4, should make these green, pawn on c4 restricts the bishop. And this bishop on a5 restricts either of the rooks from coming to d8. So yeah, well done, Mike Kummer. Now, the game isn't over, and okay, it was a much longer fight, so we'll go forward, and I might zoom through until the next kind of critical moment. H4 was played, knight e7, h5, knight f5 check, king f2, knight h6. Now rook a d1, and this was white's kind of eventual plan, was to fully control the d file because black can't fight for it, and then eventually get the rook to the 7th. Now, if you watch one of the previous lectures on endgames, I did like an hour-long lecture on pigs on the 7th rank. I don't personally like to call them pigs, but if you do get your rook to the 7th rank, it's one of the best kind of endgame concepts that you can employ. So after pawn g6, which is kind of a bad move, h take g6, this knight is undefended and attacked. White just won a pawn. So black realized that. He played king g7. White takes another pawn, king take, and now rook d7. And this is just complete domination for white. Every single white piece well placed. Black, meanwhile, struggling tremendously. Now black survived. Like amazingly enough, the game continued. King g7. White wins the a7 pawn. Rook a8. Take, take. And then this position was reached. I should mention, rook d1 is a blunder. I should put this in training mode. What white has to realize in this position is black has a threat. Now, of course, in the game, white allowed the threat, and black did not execute the threat. But let's imagine that black is about to execute the threat. First of all, what does black want to do? Next move. Yeah, so black wants to play bishop takes c4, taking advantage of this kind of undefended bishop on a5. Next question is, what should white do to defend against the threat? Yeah, really just move the bishop anywhere. So get your bishop off kind of the target square. I like bishop d2. It's kind of defensive, but also aggressive because you're attacking the knights. And then eventually you just want to play a4. Just make sure the rook can't attack on the a file. Now, after rook d1, black had his kind of big opportunity, and this would have allowed black to come back into the game. Because after bishop takes c4, white loses a pawn, but then is left with some weaknesses. Because the a2 pawn in some lines can be taken with check, and e5 is also weak. So if white takes, black takes, a2 is hanging, knight g4 is coming, I think black's winning another pawn. Luckily for Mike Kummer, black played not the best move, bishop c8, and then b4. And I don't know if you guys know, there's a term in chess, which kind of is demonstrated here, where the bishop defended by the pawn blocks the open file. Do you guys know what this is called? If you have a minor piece defended by a pawn blocking an open file. It's called a forepost. A forepost, F-O-R-E post. Similar to an outpost. Usually an outpost is like a knight defended by a pawn, which can't be attacked by another pawn. Now, I only learned this like a couple years ago. It was from another grandmaster who has more expertise in positional chess. And this is actually a common idea, especially when there's like rooks trying to infiltrate open files. If you can set up a forepost like this, then you limit like all the play from the rook. So game continues, bishop a6, c5. Let's zoom forward. The rooks do not get traded. I think if you're black here, you're down a pawn. What you want to do is key pieces on the board and try and make things complicated. That's usually the general strategy when you're worse or you're at the disadvantage. You want to create chaos. So black kind of maintains the tension, king f8, knight d4, so eventually a trade is forced. Take, take. Now king e7, and now the game continues. I'm probably going to zoom through the next several moves. But the important thing to point out, it is opposite color bishops, meaning white has a dark square bishop, black has a light square bishop. And these positions are not always easy to win, even if you're up a pawn, because sometimes it's hard to break through. In this case, white has only one passed pawn on a2. Don't know if we can call this passed pawn because it barely can move forward. So the rest of the game is kind of Mike Kummer struggling to break through in the position. Eventually he does, but took some mistakes from black. So zoom forward. And let's get to the key moment. So black's rook actually activated first, attacking the a-pawn, bishop d6. I'm sure if you watch the video, like Mike Kummer is almost like jumping with joy, especially after this move. He's daring black to take the pawn because rook h8 is coming. So black takes the pawn, rook h8, king d7. And now, decent move from white, rook f8. And this moment kind of made me really sad because if I were black, there's just one very clear defensive move, which has to be played, but black didn't play this move.
Rook f3.
So rook f3, very good. I mean, you have to come behind, check the king, hold on to your f-pawn. Black played rook b3. Maybe not realizing that rook f3 was possible, maybe thinking he's about to win b4. But when you give away the f7 pawn, this is pretty fatal for black because now the g pawn is a pass pawn. And this is all white needs to win the game. So king e8, rook e7, king d8, g5, rook f3, king g4, rook back to b3. And now actually pretty nice technique by Mike Kummer. Gives away the b pawn, just plays g6 after take, king g5. And after rook to b3, g7, check, king h4, rook g6. This is a nice move by white. How does white win this position?
Rook a7.
Very good, rook a7. You just want to kind of come from the other side and then eventually deliver the check on the back rank. So rook a7, and it's pretty difficult to stop the idea of rook a8. So yeah, I know it's kind of fun to criticize Mike Kummer, but he actually did some good things this game. A lot of not so good things from both sides, but enough good things to win the game. So good job, Mike, wherever you are in this world. We can move on. And we have like 5 minutes left. So we have maybe a game we can go over, but I wanted to open up to you guys. If you guys have any questions, you guys are the viewers. You can choose any specific questions, or we could just do another game. Another game? Okay. Let's try and find like an entertaining game. Quick board. Let's see. We can look at the Toxic Hunter game. Actually, let's look at this game. I think this was a relatively interesting game. We'll just try and zoom through, look at the critical points. This was sent in by someone named Saman, and he said he really likes our show, Your Choice, which I guess he recommends that we change the name to Your Choice rather than Viewer's Choice. And he said that this game was determined by just one pawn. And I looked at the game because I didn't trust him when I read that the game was just determined by one pawn. And I saw the game and it was kind of actually just determined by one pawn. And it was actually kind of impressive. So let's zoom forward. We'll get to kind of the key position. Nimzo-Indian, some weird moves were played early on. Maybe black setup is a little bit questionable. White did something which looks good here, but is actually a mistake. E4 can be punished. Black to move. What's the best move? G5. And yeah, it's unfortunate when you're like taking over the center, but you just took over the center too early. And the problem for white is E4 is now hanging because of this pin. But that was missed. Bishop e7 is played. Let's zoom forward even more. And what actually happened, because Saman is playing white, and he was down a pawn for a good portion of the game. And they got somewhere in this position. Another example of a pig on the 7th. And it was actually like kind of annoying for black to deal with, because white had this, this really active rook, and black's rooks were passive. The bishop was also passive. And black played this move c6 here, which I didn't really like. Because what it allows white to do is play d6, and then just cement the rook on e7. Then it's very hard to kind of deal with white's really actively placed pieces. But the game continues, rook f e8, queen e2. And now this is interesting, because now a pawn gets to e7. White's still down a pawn, but a pawn on the 7th really has to be taken seriously. And especially when you ever have a pawn either like on the 6th or the 7th and you're white, you always want to pay attention to like the pawn promotion tactics. And there are a few missed opportunities in this game, but later on white played pretty well. So queen e6 was played. The other thing about this position is that if white loses the e7 pawn for free, it's probably just going to be a straightforward win for black. But if white can keep the e7 pawn, then that's what's going to give white the best chances. So rook e1 was a logical move, rook e8, and now a simple discovered attack from white, queen d2. Discovered attack on the queen to e6, queen g4. Now this is a really interesting position, and you have to kind of make an observation here that this queen is defending the d7 pawn. So white's goal in this position is to remove the queen from g4, so he can play queen take d7. And the question becomes, is there a way to make the queen move away from g4? Any ideas? F3 is what black played. And this almost works, but fails because f3 is too weakening. And we'll see that after f3, queen f5, white played g4. Looks like we're driving away the queen from d7, but then there's this annoying queen c5 check. And white doesn't have time to take on d7, unfortunately. The better move, very similar to f3, is just h3. Because now if queen f5, g4 actually works. There's no queen moving with check. And wherever the queen moves, say queen f6, then we just take on d7. That's winning for white. So not the easiest tactic to find, but you kind of have to make the observations, which leads you to finding this kind of simple, kind of not so simple move h3. What happened in the game? f3 was played, queen f5, g4, queen escapes with check, queen e3, defending check and defending the pawn. Queens get traded. When I first saw this position, I thought black should just easily win the pawn and win the game, but that's not what happened. d5 was played, knight e2. So black has a very straightforward plan of playing king f7 and taking the pawn. White played knight g3, making sure that if king f7, it could be met with knight to f5. And then defending the pawn, and also there's all these fork possibilities. Black is actually guaranteed to get forked, no matter what happens. So black played g6 here, which looks good, preventing knight f5, again threatening king f7. But then white was really resourceful. White played h4. And after king f7, h5. And the point became that black really didn't have any time to take on e7, because if rook take e7, there's pawn take g6. Black's kind of in a quagmire. So what happened was, after h5, black took, and then white got the knight to f5, and then white's pieces were just overpowering. Knight d6 is coming. Good luck stopping it. So black played king g6, knight d6 is played, and white's just completely winning now. d4, just take with check, rook back, and black was forced to give away the rook, and white won. I don't know how long this game ended up going. Too long. Black didn't resign. Praying for stalemate. Okay, finally resignation. So I thought this was a really cool game because it showed that, yeah, white had like a very far overextended pawn, but that pawn turned out to be more of a strength than a weakness. And I guess his rating is only 1400, but it was pretty impressive play. So I think we'll end it with that. And don't forget, submit your games, and maybe we'll have more interesting games to look at next time. Thank you.